Hello, and welcome back to The Path. My guest today is Mich Doyle sensei from Australia. Mich Doyle sensei originally started his training in Japanese goju-ryu and then moved into Okinawan goju-ryu and kobudo. He's also a retired police officer. Mich Doyle sensei has been my friend for many years now, and I've always been impressed with his thirst for knowledge. He's always continuously trying to improve and better his understanding of karate and the human body. I hope you enjoy this interview as much as I did conducting it. So without further ado, let's get into the interview. I give you Mich Doyle sensei. Good to see you again.
Oh, good to see you, James. Always
Thanks for agreeing to doing this.
Pleasure. My pleasure.
For the people who might not know who you are, could you explain a bit about your background and who you are?
Yes, by all means. My name is Michael Doyle. I live in a country town in Victoria called Numurkah, which is a couple of hours north of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. I run the Numurkah Dojo, and I've been running that since we started it in 1986. We started in a high school gym. 5 or 6 years later, we built our own dojo. So it's been a permanent dojo, virtually since then. We teach goju-ryu. We're members of Rusakai. When I first started goju, actually, I should backtrack a little bit to my introduction to karate. So I lived in a country town in southern New South Wales in Australia, and at a very, very young age, around about 1961-ish, a retired sailor from the Australian Navy moved in across the road to me. When I say retired, he would have been only in his mid to late 20s, I suppose. But he, when he was in the Navy, he toured a lot of Asia and went to Japan quite often. And when everyone got off the boat and went to the various bars, he used to go to dojos. He could handle himself fairly well before he started his karate. At the age, he was a fairly big chap. At the age of 15, he was into bare knuckles boxing at a local, I shouldn't say local, but a hotel about 10 miles out of this country town on a Saturday for prize money. And it was a situation where people would bet on it. So like it was an illegal type activity, but he got his grounding in fighting from there. So he was only a teenager, but he was fighting men and he could hold his own. And when he joined the Navy, he was the heavyweight Australian boxing champion for the Navy. So he could handle himself very well. He started karate when he was in various places in Japan. He did shitoru, or I think later became pani shitoru. And it was very traditional. He was set up, he used to work in a butter factory, a disused butter factory. And he had set a dojo up there, all the traditional stuff, the makawaras, the buckets of sand and pebbles and all that, the stuff that goes with Japanese karate. But he wouldn't train me. You had to be 15 years of age to train in that dojo. But he did show me a few things because we were like neighbours, and I used to go with him every day to his farm and feed animals and stuff. And so he did show me a few things, and that created the interest, and it was virtually sparked from there. So the first books I probably read were karate books or Masoyama type books, and then I went off to boarding school. When I got back, he'd stopped training. So when I was old enough to enter that dojo, he'd actually closed it down, but he was still training a local policeman who I became very close friends with. So I trained with him. So that was my sort of introduction to like proper karate training. And then I heard about Lebanese sensei, who in those days had opened a dojo in Echuca, which is a border town between New South Wales and Victoria. And he used to train there on a Saturday afternoon. They started at 1 o'clock and finished about 5 o'clock. So it was 4 hours of training. And in those days, I didn't have a car. I was still going to school. But I managed to hitchhike and catch a bus and get a ride. And I got there. And first class, absolutely hooked. And I thought, no, I'm in the right place. the right instructor, and that was the start. So I've eventually worked out I needed a more permanent way to get to this class. So I encouraged some of my friends, and in the end I had about 25 people from this country town coming down to train in a chuka every Saturday. Training was really, really hard, like lots of low stances. Matter of fact, there were many occasions where we walked out of that dojo at 5:30, and the 3 or 4 of us were getting in the car. We actually had to help each other across the road. You couldn't walk properly until the following Thursday, normally, just in time just to do it again and start it again. So that went on for about 20 months. And then I joined the Victoria Police Force, and I moved to Melbourne. When I was in the academy, I used to go to what they call the Baldwin Dojo in Melbourne, where Tino Sobrano sensei. I don't know if you've ever heard of Tino Sobrano.
I don't think so.
He had a quite famous daughter, Kate Sobrano, a singer. Doesn't ringing no bells? Oh, okay. Anyhow, it was Tino Sobrano sensei and Cell sensei had brought Goju-Kai to Victoria. They had both been in the army together. They were both Hawaiians, and they settled in Australia and set up Goju-Kai. So it's the Yamaguchi Goju-Kai. So I started training with Cell senseis, like, you know, partner with being Tino sensei at his dojo. When I graduated from the academy and I moved into the city, I then trained at various other dojos that were still under the umbrella of Tino Sobrano sensei. And then I moved out to where that Baldwin dojo was. So I eventually came back to his dojo. And then in the end, I was in the search and rescue squad in those days. I was able to train at Tino Sensei's house. He had a garage that he'd turned into a small dojo. So I did semi-private classes of a morning between, say, 6 and 7, 3 days a week, and was able to get to a couple of evening classes at various other dojos around the area. Then I moved here in '86, and we started the Yamurka Dojo from there, and the rest is history as far as the establishment of Yamurka Dojo. In, I think it was '97, Cell Sensei took it. Oh, we went with a team, the Australian team that went to Okinawa, that competed in the Karate and Kabuto World Championships, and we met Gadget Sensei there. Within Kabuto, we trained with Gadget Sensei. We trained with some other senseis in karate, but we came back, I think it was in 2001, and trained with Senaha Sensei. We asked to join his organisation, and 12 months later, Senaha Sensei came to Australia, and he said yes, we were accepted into his organisation, so we've been in Rurusukai ever since. So since that time, we've tried to get to Okinawa every 2 years since then, or sometimes that we've had a few trips where I had a few years where Senaha Sensei has come out here. So we've been members of Rurusukai since about 2001, I'm thinking. That's without me looking at any notes or anything. That's just sometimes my memory's like.
So what was the, you said that you came in '97 for the tournament, but what was the impetus to train at other dojos, just to look around, or?
Oh, well, what had happened is there'd been a breakup within the Goju-Kai organisation. I think that was actually not long after we started in '86, where a number of the fourth dans from Tino Sobrano's sensei's dojo wanted to split away from the organisation, and they'd approached Cell Sensei and asked to go with him. So he eventually agreed, and so we went from Goju-Kai to Goju-Ryu Australia. We became Goju-Ryu Australia late '86. I'm thinking off the top of my head, and we stayed that way. And Cell Sensei was thinking we needed to be affiliated with an organisation within Okinawa. So he looked around for a long time. He did quite a bit of research in relation to who we should go with. So we eventually found Senaha Sensei, and Cell Sensei thought he was ideal, which he was. So we asked to join his organisation and were accepted.
Oh, I see. Excuse me. So how did you find the transition between a Japanese style goju-ryu to an Okinawan style?
Well, for me, there wasn't that much, because probably in the late 80s, I had sort of started to do a lot of research into the application of kata. So I was looking for a little bit of change, because within Goju-kai there was, other than the bunkais, which aren't really self-defense type applications of the kata, I was looking for something different anyhow. Probably the most significant for me might have been the we used to do a lot of high kicks. There's obviously no high kicks in Rusakai. I only wish we'd done that about 10 or 15 years earlier, because I eventually wore my hips out. Needed a hip replacement in one hip, and now I need another one on the other. So I overdid it. I mean, I knew about recovery time. I'd sort of been a member of the Australian Sports Medicine Federation, which was since I was a teenager. So I was interested in those sort of things. So I knew about recovery, but I didn't apply it too well, and I virtually just wore myself out, probably from doing too much training, more than anything else. But getting back to your question, it was fairly smooth for me. I found it's just something that felt right. The emphasis on hitting hard, the emphasis on taking someone down very quickly, getting the job done very quickly. So it went from a sparring type situation, which is vastly different, to a self-defense type situation. So it suited me down to the ground.
And was that because of your police training that you were kind of interested in that, or has it always been that way?
No, it's always been that way. When I was in the police force, when I came here, I did become what they call a defensive tactics instructor. So for a couple of days a week, I was teaching police self-defense, but that wasn't the reason for me taking that sort of a line. It was basically because I was trying to work out the interpretation of kata, and I spent a fair bit of time trying to do that. That's not an easy thing to do. I eventually started looking at the 48 diagrams, the Babushi, which predate many of the kata, worked out a lot of the interpretations for those, and that gave me a fairly good leg up to a good understanding of the kata.
And excuse me, something wrong with my voice today.
You need to take a drink.
Need a beer. So let's see. So what was training like when you first started in the, was it late 70s, I guess?
Oh, no, early 70s.
Early 70s?
With Cell Sensei?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Oh, it was arduous. I've always been interested in fitness, and very common people who, when they first come into that class, they would vomit because it was just so arduous. There were only minimal break in that 4 hours. There were minimal breaks, and the training was full on as you could possibly imagine. And he did get us quite fit. He produced a high level of fitness. Both Tino Sensei and Cell Sensei had both been in the army in Vietnam, so there was a militaristic approach to their training, very regimented. So, and there was a push. You trained very hard, but mind you, that level of fitness got me into a lot of things within the police force. I mean, not long after I entered the police force, I joined the search and rescue squad. I had no trouble passing the fitness test for the search and rescue. It was a breeze. That training, I didn't realise at the time the level that we'd sort of got to, because the only other people I was sort of hanging around were training as well. I mean, you weren't trained. You weren't with Joe Blow down the street who didn't have that sort of fitness. So it was quite arduous. Lots and lots of push-ups. The training, the basics were basic, pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. We did basic kata over and over and over again, and you couldn't slacken off. He would keep the pressure on all the time. So, but mind you, it was quite good. It was really, really good training. And
a lot of people I talk to from the 70s and 80s always talk about how much more contact there was back then. When
you can say that. Yeah, there was quite a bit of blood went onto the floor, and so they used to groin kick a lot in those days. I mean, within goju-ryu, the sparring, it was groin kick. That was a very common technique. But mind you, it's quite a good technique. It's funny. Can you think of a kata that's got kingeti in it?
It's specifically doing it? No.
No, yes, but mind you, it's a very effective technique. But anyhow, there was a lot of that, and the contact was pretty severe. I mean, you just couldn't get away with it in this day and age. But back then, they did.
That's a common refrain too. Get arrested now for doing that.
Yeah, and you probably get sued as well. Yeah, so, but mind you, it's good that it doesn't exist like that, because I think you wouldn't have too many people training at all in this day and age. My problem is I probably did that for too long, trained at that intensity, because if you say box or you play a contact sport, you've normally finished by the time you're late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s at the latest. You finish that type of activity. But we kept that intensity going, decade after decade after decade. And I didn't have the nous to say, hang on, I need to adjust. And I didn't do it quick enough, put it that way. So, yeah, that's why I pay a price now.
So is there anything that you miss from the old times that you think could be a benefit now, or that you used to do?
I'm thinking, no, I'm pretty happy with the way we're going within my dojo, because when we do drills, there's quite a bit of effort still goes into the drills. There's an X amount of reality goes into the drill. So things aren't out of control, but quite often things can be quite hard. And for particular individuals who I know can take a little bit of contact, I will give them the contact. I wouldn't let anyone else give them the contact, but I will give them the contact. And mind you, I shouldn't say it's good to get hit, but that's that can be taken the wrong way. But how people react when they do get hit can influence what's going to happen next. Some people get hit, and if they've never been hit before, can react in a really negative way. So, I pick the person, I pick the level of contact that's going to be for them, and I make sure they can handle it. I mean, we rarely have an accident where there's too much impact, but I let them sort of experience the contact. But it's, as I say, it's very controlled.
And how about the like the fitness training, the calisthenics and things like that?
Within the sessions that I conduct now, because the sessions only go for an hour and a half. Back then, an hour and a half, well, that was nothing. I mean, they were like 2 and 3 hours. So the time has doubled. So you can't fit 45 minutes worth of warm up in. I've got to stop the warm up at the 15 to 20 minute stage to fit everything we want to do into the class. So people are left to do their own supplementary training in their own time. They can come and ask for advice on what they should do, and most of them do that. How to do, if they're going to do weights or if they're going to do some sort of aerobic type exercise. I will give them advice on what to do, how often to do it. You might even give a bit of dietary advice as well. So, yeah.
What do you typically recommend for, say, training or diet? That's kind of interesting to me.
Really? Oh, okay. I'm into, I shouldn't say, I'm not into a caveman type diet, but I try and eat as many natural foods as possible. So I don't have very much processed food. I try to keep processed food to a minimal, except when I'm on holidays. I'm on holidays, I'm allowed to have a break. But throughout the normal part of the year, it'll be mostly unprocessed type foods. That's as a general type rule, and obviously a lot of vegetables within that. I try and keep, say, the protein that I'm going to eat in any, say, one meal no bigger than the size of, say, my fist. So I don't overdo the protein. And depending on what you're doing, I mean, there are times when you may need a bit more protein, so you might go a bit larger with the protein element, but lots of vegetables, lots of green vegetables with it as well. And I try and put a fair bit of variety, although it's harder in a country town to put a whole lot of variety. When I go to Japan, it's easy to get, they have so much variety in breakfast, has so much variety. But I try and put as much variety in as well to the diet.
And someone coming to you for supplementary training, what would you typically recommend to people?
It depends on their age. I mean, if they're somebody who's 22 or 23, it's going to be a lot different to somebody who's, say, 53, and their background, what they've done as far as their exercise in the past, and especially for the person who's, say, in their early 50s, what injuries they have. We'll try and get the injury fixed. Any imbalances they may have in their bodies, they may have like a part of their back is imbalanced left to right. I'll try and get balance, the body balanced, and then we start to work on aerobic, anaerobic, and then strength exercises as well, and flexibilities, and always flexibilities, always. Right throughout your training life, you lose flexibility. It's hard to get back. To get yourself flexible, as long as you take it nice and slow, is I think so. It's a good way to go. We used to, when I was trained in the early 70s, the stretching was very arduous, so you were pushed into the stretch a lot. All these days, I don't do that. You only stretch to, say, 30% of the effort in the stretch. You stretch at a lot lighter intensities. And I mean, within ages, we go through various types of stretching, whether it be static stretching or dynamic stretching or stretching with aids or whatever.
I think that, well, in Canada, certainly, people are not very flexible. I would imagine Australia is pretty much the same, or
yes,
general people off the street?
Yeah, they generally, even kids these days, you see kids who you come to your children's class who sit down and they can't hardly straighten their legs when they're seated. When I first started goju-kai with sensei, I was very interested in the breathing that happened, and Gogen Yamaguchi sensei had actually got himself involved in yoga and the breathing and stretching exercises within yoga. So I went looking at that because at that time there wasn't a lot of information about in relation to what's involved in the breathing exercises. Although Sanshin breathing is, it's quite a simple type breathing. It's different to yoga breathing, but essentials, the mechanics, it's lungs. You're going to put air in your lungs. The mechanics is the same. So I did get involved in some yoga for a while in the 70s. Matter of fact, in Australia at the time, there were only women doing yoga. There were very, very few men doing yoga. So I found out who was the top yoga man in the world in Hatha yoga. So I went to a place called Pune in India and trained with him for a while to get an understanding of pranayama for breathing, and which helped me a lot. And Sanshin is a kata that takes a lifetime to develop, but the methodology of the breathing is really simple. There are some exercises within pranayama or breathing exercises in yoga which are insanely difficult and take ages to master.
Oh, we should talk about that the next time you come to Okinawa. I'm kind of interested in that as well.
Oh, okay, no problem. We could do that.
So, sorry?
I hope that's not too far in the future.
Oh, I haven't heard of anything.
No,
Any trips coming up?
It won't be a trip. It'll be because I go to Japan twice a year, and I'm just thinking I should fly over to Okinawa because I get down as far as Fukuoka, so it's not that far from Fukuoka.
No, it's pretty. It's a little bit, about an hour and a half, maybe.
Yeah,
2 hours maximum.
Yeah, I've been going to the sumo in mainland Japan twice a year for the last 4 or 5 years.
They often have batches down here as well.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they come down a few times a year to do little, I guess a shiai or something. I don't know what they call it, but.
Oh, okay. That would be the demonstration.
It might be. It might be.
Yeah. They do tours of all over Japan with it, but I didn't realize they went as far as Okinawa.
So maybe let's move into when you started doing Kobudo and why.
Kobudo, I've got to go back a fair. When I first started with that policeman I described, before I started with Cell Sensei, he was doing, he was doing Kobudo. Before I started karate with Cell Sensei, this policeman was doing Kobudo, and so I think we only had Bo, and I had Bo and Sai. We might have Nunchaku as well. So I had an introduction there, and when I was training with Tino Sensei, we had a summer camp once, a week-long summer camp in Mount Evelyn, and Tino Sensei had brought over Inoue Hanshi who was an 8th dan from mainland Japan, and that we did Kobudo for a week there, and he did it. I think he may have had 1 or 2 weekend seminars after that as well. So that was the introduction, but it was Japanese Kobudo. So I had an interest from way back. So that when we went to Okinawa in '97 and met Gadja Sensei, we trained with him, and I thought, this is the real deal. So we virtually just kept. I've kept it up since the word go. Every time I'm with him, I videotape the sessions and refer to them weekly, virtually. So I normally videotape most sessions that we'll do, and use those videotapes all the time to hone the techniques. So I find Kobudo to be an extension of karate. I mean, the main thing I do is karate. Secondary thing would be Kobudo, but it falls under that martial art umbrella. So one's part of the other. That's how I work it out. I don't put an over emphasis on the Kobudo.
For people who don't know, could you maybe tell us a little bit about Gadja Sensei? What kind of Kobudo, what kind of karate does he do? And
if you don't know Gadja Sensei, Gadja Sensei does goju-ryu, which is in many ways is a sister style to goju, although when you see them, you think that they're hardly related, but they've got some of the kata have similar names, but if you saw them, you may not recognize them as the same. So he does Matayoshi family Kabuto. So he trained with the Matayoshi family, and he also trained with Itakosa sensei. He trained with Itakosa sensei as well. So we've done Bo, Sai, Tonkwa. They're the main ones that we do with him, but there are some others for the higher grades, but the main ones we do with him are the fundamentals. He's very much very grounded in what he does, and he's currently I'm at a mental blank. I think he's currently a ninth dan.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, ninth dan. Because he went from one rank and he jumped a couple because he had been so long since he was graded. Yeah, but very nice man.
Yeah, I quite like him. So,
and I have Kabuto of a Sunday. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning of a Sunday morning. It's the idea being they do 2 hours of the Kabuto. It's 10 o'clock when they finish. They've still got their Sunday for their family. And there's actually two of the students come from Echuca, which is that place I mentioned before, which is about nearly an hour's drive from here. So yes, it's not exactly around the corner. And they come most every Sunday.
So, in what way do you think Kobudo helped your karate? Is there anything you can think of, or?
I would probably say it the other way around. In what way did the karate help the Kobudo?
Okay, that works too.
Because Kobudo is virtually, the weapons are an extension of you, or an extension of you. The weapon becomes part of you, and all of a sudden with a bow, it's if you're holding half the bow, or if you got hold of the bow in the center, you've got another 2 or 3 feet of you to apply. But the power generation is virtually the same. The mannerisms for stepping is virtually the same. So karate fits in with Kobudo very easily. Once you start, you flow on into it very, very quickly. But well, the thing I find with Kobudo is people, they forget they're holding a weapon. It's a weapon, so it's not an instrument. So it's not like a something you twirl around in your fingers like a baton twirler. It's a weapon. So you need to keep that venomous intent as you operate it. If you don't do that, you're wasting your time virtually. And in a self-defense scenario, and a real self-defense scenario, where if you are a karateka and you have done Kobudo and you've got the opportunity to pick up a weapon to defend yourself, I think far better to pick up the weapon to defend yourself than to just rely on empty hands. If you could have the advantage of leveraging some sort of a instrument weapon, it's to your advantage in a big way. So I mean, a lot of people aren't doing Kobudo these days because they're not joining the dots between self-defense and what's happening in Kobudo. Because if you can operate a bow, a sai, and a tonkwa, you can virtually operate anything in your kitchen or anything that's laying about as a weapon. So in that way, it's a very practical self-defense methodology.
So putting on your policeman's cap, what do you think about the training for karate and Kobudo for like as a policeman? Do you think they're like effective things for altercations, or?
Well, you've got to qualify that these days, because the police these days have additional weapons at their disposal. So they've got a steel baton. So the police in Victoria have got what they call an ASP baton, which is an expandable steel baton to use, which breaks out to about, I don't know, I think it's about 18 inches or so. It's made of steel. They've got OC spray, which is capsicum spray.
Mm-hmm.
Capsicum spray destroys a lot of fights pretty easy. So, and it works remarkably well. Every now and again, you'll get somebody that is so far out of it that it may not have an effect on it. And I've seen plenty of those, but generally speaking, capsicum spray puts people down, even if they're very, very drunk and drugged up, puts them down pretty well.
In Canada, we use it on bears.
Yes, that one in Canada, I see. You can buy it in Japan too. I've seen it in mountain shops in Japan.
Oh, probably, yeah.
That one you use on bears is 10% oleocapsicum resin. The one they use for humans is only 5%. But mind you, the one for bears will obviously work fairly well on humans. When I was, as I said before, a defence tactics instructor, and part of that was you had to go and do the instructor's course for spraying people. Half the course is involved in the treatment of the person after you've sprayed them, but they asked for volunteers on the first day for who would be prepared to get sprayed, because they can't make you get sprayed. Anyhow, I thought, oh, I'm going to be doing this. I might put my hand up. So I put my hand up, and they didn't spray us until the last day. And I remember they said, all right, everyone who volunteered to get sprayed, step forward. Well, everybody stepped back, and there was only about 4 of us standing there. And I remember I thought, oh, maybe I should have stepped back. And then the first person got sprayed, and they got a good spray, but he fell apart physically, emotionally, everything. And I'm thinking, and he went down, and he was screaming. I thought to myself, oh, this might not have been a good idea. But because you had to get sprayed, and then you had to perform a number of tasks. You had to go and punch a bag, and they gave you a firearm, and you had to deploy the firearm. It was only a blank sort of thing. It didn't actually deploy a live firearm. You had to deploy a firearm at a target after you'd been sprayed and perform tasks. Anyhow, I got sprayed, and it did the task, but it lasted 45 minutes before I could see again and could move around readily. But the person who was with me that I drove home, when I say drove home, drove him back up to the country in a 2.5-hour drive, he was completely gone. It lasted 3.5 hours for him, or 2.5 hours, sorry, for him. So a dramatic effect. But the point I was making is that when you have those tools, do you need as much self-defense? There will come times when you can't access the tools, and then it's obviously handy, probably not so much for impacting, but you'll need to be able to control people, control people's energy, and be able to put them down so you can secure them.
What about for self-defense? Would you recommend karate and kobudo or to somebody, or would you recommend MMA or something like that? Or
I'm not a really big fan of MMA. I've seen there are some very good fighters amongst them, but I'm not a big fan of MMA. There are methodologies for learning self-defense that are more efficient than karate. Having said that, because karate allows you to move forward in such a way that you'll take on attributes within yourself that perhaps will not put you in a situation where you'll need self-defense. You'll develop confidences within yourself. You'll know what you can and what you can't do. You'll probably be able to judge what somebody else may or may not be able to do, and you should be able to avoid situations probably a little bit easier. So for self-defense, your ability to talk matters, I think, a lot. If you could talk your way out of it, you talk your way out of it. If when you get involved in a confrontation, if you become extremely nervous and can't talk, that's not a good situation for you. So the karate training may help you to have the confidence to hold yourself together, to talk your way out of it. Plus, karate training and the ability to sprint may help, depending on whatever situation you're in. So the subtleties or the nuances that are involved in karate can be of enormous benefit within self-defense. But if you just want to learn a couple of maneuvers, there are probably more efficient ways to do self-defense than taking up karate. But to me, because of all those extras that are involved in karate, or what you potentially get as long as you go looking for it, make it a worthwhile thing. I happen to think, as long as you're with the proper instructor, karate is probably one of the best exercise routines going, as long as you use common sense with it. And I mean, when I say best fitness routines, I mean across all the levels of energy systems within the body. I think, I don't know, there's 6 or 7 energy systems within the body. Going across all those, I can't think of an activity that will get you into a better condition. There may be some activities that will take you further in any one or two of those energy systems, but as far as a general fitness is concerned, I struggle to see anything else that can come anywhere near surpassing proper karate training, as long as the instructor is switched on to what's going on and switched on to the student. If in a general situation, if you have a big class, that may not be the class. That may not be the situation. It could be very, very hard for an instructor to have an in-depth understanding to any particular individual in, say, 24 or 25 or 35 people. That you probably couldn't do that. But if it's a small group, the instructor should be able to, guide that person the best way down the track for them.
I always found that all my injuries come from my supplementary training. They don't usually come from my karate training unless it's a broken finger or something like that.
Yeah, no, I've probably got over my body some direct bones that have been shattered from impacts and those sort of things. And plus my hips, I shouldn't have done that amount of high kicks, because I used to do a routine of high kicks, nearly every day, and for a fairly protracted period of time. I could kick okay, but I should have stopped decades ago. I mean, had we found Sensei 10 years earlier, I probably wouldn't have these hips today.
So what would you typically do in your training now?
No, for me,
let's start with that for you, and then how would you teach?
Okay, you're going to have to excuse me because I'm probably a Sunshin and Tensho person right now, because I'm awaiting surgery on my hip, and I'm seeing a surgeon this time tomorrow week. So
Okay.
I'm very limited right now. But for teaching, if I can describe the teaching methodology I use, if we can talk of where we go from creating someone to a shodan. So they obviously going to start at 10th kyu, and they work down to shodan. From when they get to shodan, I'm looking for them to know all the Rusukai kata, all the goju kata. Between shodan and nidan, I'm looking for like 100% improvement from shodan to nidan. Virtually, the effort that required them to get from 10th kyu to shodan is going to be nearly duplicated from shodan to nidan. To get to sandan, I want them to learn an application for every movement of every kata. and then we do a little pre-test before they go for grading, where they need to demonstrate, and we videotape it to keep it for them. They run through every movement of every kata, continuous, non-stop. So if they stop, we virtually have to do it again and start again. So they need to have that in their memory, and they virtually need it at reactive type timing for it. So they do that for third dan. For fourth dan, I regard that as the start of the teaching dans. So they need, over the period of a number of years, they will do somewhere between 12 and 15 talks. So I give them a subject, and they'll go off and research it, and then they'll produce a talk which they give to the students, which then gets we take a look at the talk that they've done and do a bit of a critique with them, so that they're developing theory knowledge, and they're developing teaching skill as well. And then from in fifth dan, I get them to do some work with critiquing what the fourth dans are doing. So that's like going through the dans. In relation to, say, the junior class is run by two people. As I said before, I don't run the junior class. Steve Grandall runs Mondays, and Scott Butler runs Thursdays, and they will run that class how they want it. So they actually have to work with each other so that they cover the curriculum appropriately. But for the senior class, I run the senior class. It will start with virtually the same warm-up each time, within maybe a 10-15% variation built into it. And then we will work on the fundamentals, do the H pattern kata, then sanshin, work on kata for a little while. Then at the 45-minute stage of that session, they have a quick drink break, and then we'll start to specialize in something. So, and then we actually cycle right through the whole curriculum, and it may take several months to cycle right through the whole curriculum. And where we come to the end of the curriculum, we'll then may do some sessions on kata interpretation. But I try and push it onto them. I will show them a number of things, but I will be asking them to come up with their own stuff that they're doing within the session. So it's not, you don't just come along and you get told everything. You're going to do this, this, and there. So you have to have an input yourself, and mind you, they may do things that may be impractical. Then I will have an input into what they're doing, but normally I'll just let them go on and do what they think is good for them. So what they're trying to do is develop techniques that they're good at and get practiced at the things that they think that they can do well. Quite often people's idea of what self-defense is, they've got it from television or movies or whatever, and techniques that they think may work. But unfortunately, in reality, there perhaps aren't those gaps in situations that you have to react quite fast. You have to move quite fast, and you've got to generate power to wherever you've moved to and the technique you're going. And that technique needs to be done properly with sufficient accuracy and sufficient power for what you wanted to do. And bearing in mind that power that I just mentioned needs to be, well, in the training environment, needs to be controlled so you don't hurt anyone, but it's put out with significant amount of power, but it's just controlled just before impact, obviously.
So you have several criteria that you judge these techniques on, like mobility and power, and
there is like a number of principles. Before I would expect anybody to come up with their own techniques over a period of time, I would have taught a number of those. They can put variations to those, and generally speaking, as long as I don't put pauses in the middle of the technique, because I mean, in reality, there are no pauses. Pauses don't happen. people normally get the hang of it fairly well. And
Okay.
I'm normally just really doing some fine tuning, maybe getting them to move to a better angle, those type of things.
That's kind of interesting that I've not heard of. Well, the Shotokan people, they have a professional training teachers program in Japan, but I've not heard of other people doing it.
Well, it's my way of thinking. If what happens is people go through the ranks, and then you get to say the 4th or 5th dan, and you can start to teach. What instructional component has been in your karate training?
Oh, mine, none. I've
Well,
never really thought about teaching, so I never really
no,
thought about it.
but for somebody who wants to teach, if they've just done the training, what instructional knowledge have they picked up coming along the way? I mean, if you want to be a school teacher, there are X amount of subjects that you then have to do at teachers college, which teach you how to teach.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't seem to have that within karate, and that's something that I think is lacking within the karate community. So I'm trying to address this. I mean, to be realistic, it should be something like a 2-year course or a 3-year course you do, so you understand the sports physiology of what you're doing. You understand the teaching methodologies that you're going to be using, keeping it safe, a whole realm of like safety type activities that you aren't breaching any laws with, harassment type laws or anything like that. So I think that's probably something that's lacking generally, I suppose, right around the world.
I would agree with that, yeah.
I mean, that JKA teachers program, I've never really looked at it other than reading a couple of books about it. It doesn't look like that actually teaches. You just go into more intensive training to do it. So doing more intensive training doesn't help you become a better teacher. You need to be taught. I mean, some people are just naturally good teachers, and they've probably picked it up from mimicking other people. But generally speaking, people have to be taught how to teach and to teach efficiently.
Definitely separate skills for sure.
Yeah. I mean, aren't you teaching at uni?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you would have had to do some sort of teaching course.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So why isn't it existing for karate training when you are potentially giving them some quite dangerous activities?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So I mean, I said before, karate is, in my opinion, one of the best exercise programs there is going. And I think for somebody really who wants a general fitness, really hard to get better. On the other side of the equation, if the instructor isn't switched on to the potential dangers of karate, karate can be one of the most dangerous activities you can do. I mean, there was a survey. I should say a survey. Wrong word. There was a program done in the late 80s, I think it was, where karate came in at number 33 behind ping pong as at a level of danger. That review was thrown out by the scientific community, and the ones I've heard about from European studies from, don't quote me now, 2005, 2006 era, had the reverse situation, had karate up there with one of the most dangerous activities going on. I think that mainly was looking at non-contact sport karate because of the amount of injuries that were being sustained in it throughout Europe, because sports karate is quite big in Europe.
Do you do anything for recovery, or?
Well, I don't have to worry right now because I'm, as I said before, I'm sort of incapacitated right now. Even the slightest movement in my hip causes fairly severe pain right now, so I can't do much. So I'm basically going to be looking at a new hit.
Well, I guess I'll let you go and get on with your day.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, James.
It's been fun. Yeah.
Yeah, we should ring up for a chat again.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to continue. Maybe do another interview in 6 months or something like that, or.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So,
6 months. Yeah.
Or I don't know how many people I'm going to have beforehand, but I'm sure I'm going to have to start recycling people at some point.
That's a nice way of putting it.